I take up the last chapters, which really are dealing with the idealistic outlook rather than any practical, methods or practical means to realize the unity. The basis is trying to work out in chapter 32, 33, and 34. Really speaking, he is trying to work out the certain ideals that are working and driving towards this unity of mankind. For instance, in chapter 32, he takes up this idea of internationalism. Whether internationalism, without organizing a world union or world state, could it take the place of human unity? You see, the idea is, would internationalism serve the purpose? Nation outlining its own ideology and its own, consciousness, trying to become international, not necessarily organizing a world state or a loose world union. Well, he says that that has a certain place, and that might lead to the correct formation of the ideal of human unity, but as an organization or as something practical, it is a temporary stage which man has to pass. Well, he says, he is analyzing that this internationalism is really a growth from the European mind, which takes, moves from life to an idea and then again brings back the idea to life, you see. And when it takes an idea from life, well, it gives it a form. And that form is external generally, social, political, economic, something to organize such a way life idea will come into life. That is the idea, you see. They get or evolve an idea from life. And then again from life, the movement is towards from idea to life again. That is the Western way of doing things. Internationalism is such a product of, something that came from life. For instance, it was France that first gave a very strong and definite expression to this international idea in the three slogans which France gave: democracy, liberty, equality, and fraternity. Now that was not meant only for France, it was meant for all. And France did stand for an international outlook in the giving out of that philosophy of revolution, really. Now he says that it only remained, even when France gave it a form, a vague idea. It was not applied to life. The result of this was strengthening of nationhood and nation idea rather than ushering in of an era of internationalism. It was there, but in a microscopic minority of intellectuals and idealists. It was never never touched the life of the nation. The result of organization or giving of this international slogan of liberty, equality, and fraternity was not to create an international situation or international organization or international movement. It was only to strengthen the nations. That's all. Nationalism got strengthened. And a microscopic minority of intellectuals and idealists, yes, tried to give an expression to it. For instance, I think positivism, is it not? Kant's positivism. Comte, you pronounce, I don't know how you pronounce, C-O-M-P-T-E. Comte's positivism is one result of this international outlook in literature and philosophy. You see, you find several, 2 or 3 such expressions. I think we'll come to it sometime. The difficulty is that man does not live centered around an idea. Human life is centered around vitality, vital being, desire, impulse, possession, power. Idea, yes, if it comes and serves the purpose. Otherwise, man is not centered on an idea, and especially collectivity. So the idea, the weakness of the idea is that it has no hold on life. It has no hold on the vitality of the people. If it serves life, well, life is quite content to take help of idea. But if it interferes with the main, the function of life, well, life has no much use for any idea or ideal. It doesn't care. The constitution of man, that is what requires to be changed. And if a haste is done, because man being centered around his vital being, desire being, ambition or egocentric and desire-driven being, if a haste is made in application of idea, it only results in a mixture. Something happens and life likes to go on in its own round. It doesn't accept the idea as a dictator or determining factor of power of its life. And it is it accepts the idea, but only in top surface without sincerely being convinced of it. And therefore, when giving expression to it in life, it gets mixed, diluted, and ultimately the idea doesn't seem to embody itself in life. You can say that some force is working for that idea, which is not visible. One force you can say visible is the drive of science. The scientific advance that man has attained in his individual and collective life is one factor that may support the driving of this international idea. It can make for international idea because first communication is made easy, then exchange of idea has been made easy, transport has been made simple and easy and easily accessible to all. And that would drive the idea of international unity to a far greater extent. It would be an ally to the idea, this present advance of man. But really the two things that are driving towards this is science, and second is something of a socialistic attitude of socialism. And the basis of socialism is to make the individual live for the community. Mari was asking, I don't know, she's not there. She was yesterday asking, I told her that I have told it, but can tell her. The basis of socialism is to make the individual live for the community. All schemes of it are based upon this central idea, that's all. Socialism, people refer to plans and schemes immediately. The basic idea is that the individual must not live for himself but for the community. That's the idea. And on that, then there will be, you see, ownership of state ownership and all that is based upon that idea mainly, that the individual must be made to live or must learn to live for the community. In fact, individual exists for the community. That's their philosophy, you see. These two forces, socialism and science, are making for that sort of drive towards international unity. And he says that in order really to live internationalism in life, well, the whole of humanity has to grow yet more towards some clearer intellectual and emotional life than it is capable of doing now. If it can't grow, well, the idea may be there, but it won't catch roots. I mean, it won't strike roots. And in chapter 33, he is trying to make out that if humanity is to grow, how will it grow? Says that the human being must try to think, feel, and act with the idea of oneness of human race, oneness of humanity. That is, all thought, all feeling, and all dealing must be on the basis of one world or one humanity. You see, oneness of the race must become a part of nature, means thinking, feeling, and action. And because internationalism is not a vital need now. A man can go on living without international unity. He is for it now because there is fear. I mean, it's not because he feels convinced of its necessity. Just as in the individual, moral values, spiritual values, or ethical values are secondary to his vital nature and its drive. He may want art, he may want anything, but it is simply to be an ornament of the central drive of vital life. You see, it is not a law of his life. Well, in the same way, in the life of the whole race, the need for internationalism has not become a vital need. It's a thing which only a few idealists or few thinkers or few moralists, are insisting upon. The life, if you take in the volume, I mean the large, volume of life, it is not concerned with internationalism. It's not a need. If it is there felt as a need because there is a peril. When it feels the need, it is because of fear. And the peril is of a war. It doesn't want war, therefore it wants vital need. You understand, the vital need is something which you feel, I must have it. Now, if you say, no, I must not have this, therefore, well, something of it is necessary. It is in that respect that internationalism or human unity is being felt by a large, section of collective life today. It is not a psychological need because life can very well go on without those things. Because just as in the individual, the drive is only self-satisfaction of his impulses, and the rest, even family life, community life, morality, higher values, it's all added ornament. It's all right, good if it comes in. But he is not concerned with them. If they don't come in, it doesn't matter. Life will go on with the individual. In the same way, in the nation also, this vital, this is centering around the vital is the main moot point. And the rest, if unity comes, well, it is now needed because of fear, because of peril, because of danger. It's not as if it is felt that I must have it. Well, that is a removal of fear and peril. And still, the signs of the times are not depressing. There is no reason to think that therefore, because the man is not yet ready for this or doesn't seem to think it as a vital need, therefore it will not come. There is no fear because some other powers are driving also. Unknown powers also seem to be working. Some powers in nature, you can say, if you don't want to be mystic. You can say some power in nature is working, driving man towards this unity. Forces are at work, not merely ideas. And those forces are trying to move towards unity. And the best, therefore, would be to create a sort of a rough body or a sort of an organization, formation, so to say, in which, if this idea wanted, can take birth. You see, the soul can ensoul itself or, embody itself in that body. So best would be to create a body. And to make a real start, psychological entity has really to be created. And just as a nation has got its own psychological entity and it is now a permanently established entity, in the same way this unity of mankind, well, must have a psychological entity. But it says before it is born, well, if a formation is given to it, then it could very well manage to embody itself into it and take birth and grow like a child. And just as nation has got its cultural unity, its interest, its defense, its sentiment, economic life, to unite it. In the same way, this unity, when it comes, will have to have those factors also as support of its psychological entity or psychological, center. And just as man becomes devoted to his nation, feels almost nationalism as his religion, especially in time of crisis, well, the same will have to happen to human unity. That is to say, just as nationalism becomes a creed or a religion of man who realizes his identity with the race or with the nation, well, the same attitude of religious, motive will have to be brought into existence if human unity is to become real. Because today, the religion of mankind is only intellect, in the minority also, intellectual. And I gave you the instance of positivism of Kant, you see, or humanitarianism in mankind, philanthropy. Now, these three factors, if you study the formation of positivism as a kind of philosophy where humanity is almost raised to, sort of a divinity. Humanity is the one to be worshipped. Now that positivism or humanitarianism, philanthropy, they are the expression in the life of this intellectual religion of mankind. But really to become successful, this religion of mankind must become deeper and a far greater truth to be realized than mere mind. It must go deeper than the mind. Yesterday I quoted you some passages about this need of this religion of mankind, isn't it? Yesterday I gave long quotation from Sri Aurobindo, and one part of it remains here so that I may give you a complete exposition of what he means by the religion of humanity. Yesterday we had a portion, a quotation of 2 type pages which gave a general conception of what would be the attitude of the man towards humanity. Humanity is a godhead to be worshipped. That's how it began, is it not? Humanity is a Godhead to be worshipped. Then he says, freedom, equality, and brotherhood are three Godheads of the soul. They cannot be really achieved through external machinery of society or by man so long as he lives only in the individual and communal ego. When the ego claims liberty, it arrives at competitive individualism. Competitive individualism. When it asserts equality, it arrives first at strife and then at an attempt to ignore the variations of nature. That's what socialism and communism try to do. You see, when it asserts equality, it arrives first at strife because people don't easily submit to equality. Then an attempt to ignore variations of nature, if you can become dictator, you see. And as she always, as a sole way of doing that successfully, it constructs an artificial and machine-made society. It creates a society which is artificial and it is cast in a mechanical mold. Everyone's function is fixed and you are a part of a machine and you must fulfill your part of the great social machine. A society that pursues liberty as its ideal is unable to achieve equality. A society that aims at equality will be obliged to sacrifice liberty. This you find in actual working. If you study, you will see. These are great truths which are seen, and you will see if the working, this absolutely comes true. For ego to speak of fraternity is for it to speak of something contrary to its nature. All that it knows is association, ego. Association for the pursuit of common egoistic ends. Ego knows something, but it knows only association, not brotherhood. Association for the pursuit of common ends, and the utmost it can arrive at is a closer organization for equal distribution of labor, production, consumption, enjoyment. And I have ticket for everyone having one ticket or two tickets for the weekend going to the cinema or the theater. That's as far as it can take. Yet is brotherhood the real key to the triple gospel of the idea of humanity. The union of liberty and equality can only be achieved by the power of human brotherhood. If you want to unite and create a union of liberty and equality, it can only be achieved by power of human brotherhood. It cannot be founded on anything else. See, this is called political philosophy. People, when they talk of political philosophy, well, here he gives you enunciation of principles, and you can apply it in life and find that they have really a force of, truths about it, and they bring about the enunciations that are spoken of. But brotherhood exists only in the soul and by the soul. It can exist by nothing else. You can't compel a man to feel brotherhood. You can't force that you must feel like a brother. Either he feels or he doesn't feel, isn't it? For this brotherhood is not a matter either of physical kinship, because two brothers born of the same parents quarrel very well and nicely. So he is pointing out the principle of what he understands as the ideal of brotherhood in mankind. For this brotherhood is not a matter either of physical kinship or vital association or intellectual agreement. When the soul claims freedom, it is freedom of its self-development. The self-development of the divine in man, in all his being. That is what he wants when he asks freedom. Really, he has said only wants self-development and self-development of the divine. When it claims equality, well, what it is claiming is that freedom equally for all. Freedom for growth and freedom for evoking the divine in life for all. That is the meaning of equality. When it claims equality, what it is claiming is that freedom equally for all and the recognition of the same soul, the same Godhead in all human beings. That is what it is claiming. And when it strives for brotherhood, it is founding that equal freedom of self-development on a common aim, common life, a unity of mind and feeling, founded upon the recognition of this inner spiritual unity. For these three things are in fact the nature of the soul. For freedom, equality and unity are the eternal attributes of the spirit. Freedom, equality and unity are the eternal attributes of the spirit. It is the practical recognition of this truth. It is the awakening of the soul in man and the attempt to get him to live from his soul and not from his ego, which is the inner meaning of religion. And it is that which the religion of humanity also must arrive before it can fulfill itself in the life of the race. I think that gives you the central idea of what the rest of the chapter want to say. Well, the other thing is an application to you and other things. Perhaps there might be one occasion when we can organize that. For the rest of the time, I can give you one subject matter which I dealt with at one time: ethics and international life, which referred to the policy of the United States. There was a book written by somebody, and International Fellowship in Madras gave me this subject by lending the book to me and make a study of it. Whether in United States foreign policy, you see, that was subject matter. So, well, in dealing with that, I think I will get you passages from this, my address there, which are pertinent to this whole subject, because it refers to this ideal of human unity and how far it can be brought into existence by application of ethical means or ethical, standards. It's a sign of progress that political thinking today is obliged to take into account ethical considerations, because formerly there was none. It was all either economic or military or diplomacy. That was the deciding factor. Now somehow or other ethics is being allowed to have some place. Time was when ethics was the one subject that had no place in politics. Machiavelli and his tribe regarded success as a criterion not only of correct but of good policy. If you succeed, that policy is good. That was the idea. And in the collective life of man, the law of the jungle more or less prevailed. That if you could beat down the other man, well, you are right in doing it. That was the idea. It is possible that someone following the old diplomatic line might argue that even when he adopts morally questionable means and ends, it brings that subject, you see. It is eventually to secure a moral end, good end. And that brings us straight to the question of whether good can be attained by means that are not good. Also, it raises another question. What if a man felt that the means are justified by the end? Who is to decide the ethical character of an action? Whether the action is ethical, who is to decide? Is the standard of ethics, ethical values, objective or subjective? Can you refer to any outside and say, because this happened, therefore it was ethical, or because this did not happen? Where is it? Is it inside or outside? It may be argued that there is a social morality which has to be observed at least. That is, one is not allowed openly to steal or to commit murder. That's all right. These inhibitions of man's primitive impulses are hardly acts of conscious ethical behavior on his part. He does not act consciously. It is a compulsion. And they are imposed more for the safety of society, though they may contribute indirectly to the growth of ethical values in individual's life. But when a man obeys those, he is not consciously ethical. When a man doesn't commit theft, well, he is afraid of being caught. If he can do it without being caught, he would, which he does very often. The application of ethics to international politics is very recent, and its impact is weak and slow. very weak. It doesn't, nobody thinks seriously, but they are obliged to. But there is no reason to despair, as the progress of ethics in other fields also, you take commerce, administration, and other fields of life, and there also you don't find that ethics is, as it were, the governing value of life. And if it is not so influential there in international politics, if it is very little of power, well, it's all right, it's natural. This slow influence of ethics in face of great and pressing problems might tend to encourage a pessimistic outlook that problems are there pressing for immediate solution and ethics has no power to dictate. For there in South Africa, you see the flouting not only all ethical principles but throwing to winds all Christian belief and maintains and even strengthens an unjust apartheid, is it not? Indeed. And against clear declaration of world opinion. Well, there are collectivities that appear to be diametrically opposite in their ethical basis and code. Even now, NATO powers and Russia. The whole, yes, France and Algeria, Tibet and China, China and United States, China and Formosa, Egypt and Israel. You find that their code of thinking what is right and wrong seems to differ, you see. India and Pakistan, India and Portugal, not last but least Laos, you see. Now all calling for a speedy application of some universally accepted ethical value, ethical standard or principle. They all wonder where you can apply to all. Ernest Lefever's book, The Ethics of United States Foreign Policy, I am bringing it because we are in America. That's why I thought it was good to. I spoke about this in India, in the International Legal Fellowship in Madras. There is a branch of American organization is there in Madras. And he gave me this book and wanted me to speak something about this book. So, Ethics of United States Foreign Policy with a foreword by Mr. Morgenthau. He has written a foreword. Makes a contribution to the literature on the subject. It tries to apply ethical principles of Judaic Christianity to the world situation in general and to the foreign policy of the United States in particular. Mr. Lefever's, Ernest Lefever, Ethics and United States Foreign Policy, that is a book. Now the author makes a distinction between what is morally desirable and politically possible. I'm quoting some phrases from him. He is making a distinction between legal sovereignty and political sovereignty. He shows that appeasement does not necessarily bring peace, which is true. And nor would peace always mean security, as in Hungary, is it not? There is peace, but one would say perhaps there is no security. The growth of ethics in international relations is necessarily slow because ethics depends upon the awakening of man's inner conscience. And yet ethics is not merely a system of behavior. Ethics is not merely a code of external conduct. It's a result of awakening of the conscience. There are numerous encouraging signs that permit us to take a little more optimistic view of the situation. The freedom of the individual, self-determination for nations, too, are now recognized international principles. This is now not under dispute anywhere. You may be anybody, but this too you have to grant, you see, and that is something very good. Diplomacy in the old sense of the term is almost gone. Diplomacy was arrangement behind the scenes, isn't it? I mean, a profession of some principles outside and carrying out of interest behind and so on. That is almost gone. An army is no longer the only deciding factor in dispute between nations. This has happened. Army is not decisive factor today. Army is there, it counts, but it's not the only thing that counts. Many things have to count now. Almost everywhere, as Sherlock observed 40 years ago, I'm quoting, man is erect, active and alive. I'm quoting from his book. Knowledge is more general now than it ever was before. Mind is being used more and more, and a greater equalization between men has taken place than had ever taken place before. Plants are everywhere afoot that would promote equality of man. This is the optimistic side of the picture, you see. Certain facts of contemporary history, which are characteristic of the times, might be recounted here so as to support the optimistic view of international life. I have done it in another address also, perhaps. It is the universal fear of the atom bomb. One is likely to overlook these facts also, which are behind. Unity of mankind is becoming more and more effective in shaping world events. The British and the French and Israel had to withdraw their forces from the Suez Canal without fighting. An event unimaginable only 20 years before. You couldn't imagine it 20 years before this thing happening. Man is expanding even his physical consciousness beyond the earth and is establishing his claim as the highest creature on earth, you see. Man's mastery over material energy may be a prelude, if he takes the right view of it, to his mastery over himself. The third factor is the unprecedented extent of American help to defeated rival nations and even to economically underdeveloped nations. This is a third factor. In order to put them on their feet economically, it may be argued that this help is prompted by enlightened self-interest, but its economical appearance should not be allowed to veil the great ethical, if I may say so, psychological factor, you see, the factors which are behind it. In the old order, a defeated nation was to be crushed. That was the idea. Economically, politically, it was to be occupied, and life of it, a defeated nation was to be ruined, if you could ruin it. Well, let us be happy that it is the first time in history that the conquering nations have helped the conquered to stand on their feet by extending economic help. This fact is tending to change the face of the world by removing poverty, unemployment, and ignorance. So there is an optimistic side of the picture. One more side may also be added: the attainment of freedom by India. The political freedom of this great nation has released tremendous moral and spiritual forces that have begun to act effectively in international situations. This is very patent. It has demonstrated that economic and military power are not the only factors that can govern or be given in a given situation. They are not the only things that act. It may be even said without fear of exaggeration that Indian entry into the international world has given a great fillip to ethical forces working in the world. Now, if we see the problem from fundamental point of view, we can ask this question, several questions. What is the place of ethics in all human affairs? Or what does an individual or collectivity mean to achieve by ethics or by ethical conduct? What do they want to do by that? It would come to this: what is ethics? Is it action? Is it behavior? Conduct? Is it something external, objective, or a thing of inner life and subjective? Many who accept the sanction of religion for ethics, for instance, there are people who believe that ethics has only a religious sanction. But in this age when religion has been relegated to Sunday attendance, you see, and even in its intensely religious country like India, the government is trying to be secularism, you see, is propagating secularism. Well, we have to see if it can find a true psychological, and universally acceptable basis of ethics, and also to consider the place in the scheme of human perfection. From the point of view of psychology, ethics has to deal with the willpower of man. It's an action of the willpower of man. And whose steady action in inner life of the individual produces or organizes what is known as character. When this will is applied to the formation of inner life, with ethics as its driving force, well, it creates what we call in man character. Primarily, those who regard ethics as a social or collective field might be tempted to believe that ethics is born out of need of social behavior. But that is not the whole truth of ethics. It primarily involves a subjective process. It must be something inside that makes a man think, decide, and come to a conclusion about ethics. In the individual, ethics arises from the need of harmony in the being. Why does a man seek ethics as a help to his growth or help to anything? Because he finds that he seeks harmony. When a man arrives at a point of self-development and becomes conscious of his inner being, the first thing he perceives is that his inner being is a divided kingdom. There is no harmony. His mind and his life forces are often at variance. His impulses, desires, and his intellectual ideas and ideals clash. His body is a drag to his mind. His aesthetic and ethical impulses demand contrary things. Aesthetic demands one thing, ethics demands another thing. So man is a divided kingdom. Ethics is born out of the seeking for an inner and outer harmony in oneself. In fact, ethics is a value there. In approaching the problem of ethics in collective life, there are two ways possible. One is fundamental or radical way, the other is called pragmatic way. The fundamental way would be to organize or to create a collective life on some other basis than economy. That's a radical way. How will we apply ethics to life? The radical way is there. Change the basis. That's one way. The other possible bases are spiritual, ethical principles or intellectual idealism. Men who strive to reach common spiritual realization can found a collective life around the spirit, around the aim, or those who believe sincerely in a certain ethical principle like non-violence, or to each according to his need, from each according to his capacity. Well, they may form a group life around those are values. It would be a grievous loss to humanity if India gave up her spiritual cultural motive and blindly pursued and adopted the economy-centric outlook of collective life. Well, the radical way is this, to change the whole basis. The second alternative is to bring about an ethical change, however slow and gradual, in the present basis of collective life, by slowly increasing in the individual and in collective life the subjective element. You see, bring the subjectivity to the front. The element that recognizes and acts according to the dictates of the conscience within the individual. But as I said before, ours is an age dominated by practical reason, an age of scientific outlook, and our ethics also has come under the dominating influence of these practical reasons, whose important contribution is science, and it has been molding the economic life of the collectivity. This reason, whose true function is disinterested search for the truth, has today become servant of life. It is now being used to justify, support and satisfy life impulses, desires, needs and multiplication of devices for satisfying the impulses of man. At the highest, this reason can turn to the seeking of the truths for its own sake. But even at the highest, reason is only nature become conscious in man. It is consciousness turning upon itself to find its own truths and truth of the world. That is what reason comes to. Reason is nothing else but nature turning the mirror upon its own self. The reality which it seeks is infinite, while reason is adapted to a finite field for its operation. One may accede it knows much, more is unknown to reason. The known keeps always, I think, a pace with the unknown. When it comes to deal with life, it subjects itself to what it studies. If you observe and try to find out what life wants, we find that ordinary life is devoted to satisfaction of interests, needs, desires, vital necessities, ambitions. And people devoted to these pursuits tell us seriously, this is life. Or they say this is practical life, suggesting thereby the futility of an unreality of applying any idealistic or ethical values in life. Modern culture is one rooted in dynamic vital nature of man. Its main business is to possess, to enjoy, to grow if need be by strife and also by association. It has of course many other good things. Religion, arts, ethics. It wants also some of the good things. They are more or less ornamental to decorate this dynamic life. Not the part and substance of life, as Sri Aurobindo says. You see, they can be dispensed with if need be. And the two gods of this culture are life and practical reason. The modern culture takes for granted that life is mainly for living and living comfortably, if you can, you see. This desired soul of man is now therefore accepted as free in its movement and is therefore able to act freely because it is allowed to. Unfortunately, as Sri Aurobindo says, it has brought no deliverance. It has used the machinery already created with a more feverish insistence, a vehement attempt to live more rapidly, more intensely, an inordinate will to act and to succeed, to enlarge, the mere force of living, to pile up a gigantic machinery of life. That is what it has done, a tremendous machinery for life. These things are not evil in themselves, but it may be asked, to what end are they directed? That is the question. It seems here in the puts like that. It seems like the steam driving the engine. Or rather, a force has made the driver its servant. In ancient culture also, securing the means of life was there as the first business of life. In no culture you can find this, that the first business of life is to secure means of living. That was in old times also, it's nothing new. But it was not its chief business. It was first business, not its chief business, as it is today. Society should exist not merely for the sake of this gigantic efficiency and machinery and satisfaction of life impulse. It must exist for the growth and growth towards individual and collective perfection. Growth towards individual perfection and collective perfection. The psychological aspect of life shows that the evolution of collective life has been passing through three stages. We can view it in a triple way. The psychological aspect of life shows that the evolution of collective life has been passing through three stages. We can view it in a triple way. The levels of rise are infra-rational stage, rational stage, supra-rational stage. The infra-rational movement of life, of collectivity, is made up of blind impulses, instincts, mostly rising from the subconscious. These are also common to the animal kingdom, the subconscious impulses. And life then is groping blindly for satisfaction of its impulses. Humanity could not rest satisfied in this infra-rational stage. Evidently, there was no fulfillment in it. It was condemned to insufficiency and to impermanence, as Sri Aurobindo puts it. After a long struggle and effort, man arrived at the rational stage in his collective life, which is more conscious than the infra-rational and has greater range of knowledge and self-mastery, also efficiency. But reason is not the faculty equipped for perfect knowledge. It seems to be working of an imprisoned consciousness struggling to free itself. Instead of clear light of knowledge, reason only gives half light. And it does try to create and succeeds in creating some kind of order in life. But as he puts it, it is always a provisional order. It's not an order that can reach out to a condition in which growth would be automatically, allowed to go on. Devotees of reason believe that someday in the distant future, man will arrive at perfect knowledge and lasting order by the action of collective common reason. But there is no such collective common reason in actuality. Where is it? Some even suggest universal education as a remedy for overcoming the imperfections of reason. But that is only a faith and a hope. Reason has been working in mankind for sufficiently long time, and it has not yet succeeded in creating a harmonized collective life. Instead, all along, as Sherndo says, it has created a huge competitive society, produced industrial development, and given a plutocracy in the garb of democracy. In the realm of ethics, now, apart from reason, if you come down to ethics, this reason gives man ideals which is unable to live fully in his life, which very often contradict one another. Charity and self-help, activism and quietism, self-satisfaction, self-fulfillment. And the kind of conflict between various ideals culminating in the stalemate of which Arjuna speaks in the Gita, you see, seems to be the situation which reason trying to apply itself to settlement of ethical ideals seems to lead to. The rationalistic age gave to humanity the three great ideals of collective life: freedom, equality, brotherhood. Individual freedom is the base of democracy. It gave individual freedom protected by the state and created political equality. It could not, as Sherlo puts, could not prevent unbridled competition, and consequently much equality was produced, especially in the economic field. So socialism and its sister communism came to replace what Sherlo calls the unorganized economic confusion by an organized economic order and peace. But then it was found that in this process, much of individual freedom has to be cut down. Equality has to be enforced by the state. And so, if liberty is maintained, equality would not be there. And if equality is attempted, then liberty has to be reduced or eliminated, perhaps. Yes. Only brotherhood remains, and that may be the ethical key to the solution of the problems. Just I read a passage which was pertinent. We have now to consider the supra-rational in life. Whether any supra-rational can be brought into active manifestation in human individual and collective life. There's some people always feel scared when you mention the supra-rational because to them it smacks of savors of mysterious and unknown and superstitious and something like that. It may be only another name for the unreal, and even if it exists, unknowable. When you bring in the supra-rational, that's their argument. But men come in contact with the supra-rational awful enough in their life, particularly men who are a little cultured and developed. It is that which brings the impulse of self-giving, of service, attraction for the true, attraction for the good in man's life. There are in man's life infra-rational movements also, as there are in the animals. I mean, movements which are egoistic, ego-asserting and selfish and, egocentric. But also there are in man ego-exceeding and ego-enlarging instincts present and active. In all cultural activities of man, he often comes in contact with the supra-rational. Take poetry. At its height, poetry goes beyond the limits of reason. And man has known the supra-rational in his cultural activity. It touches where is it? Put it out a little for some time. The plane of inspiration and revelation. Man knows the supra-rational in many fields of his cultural activity. He cannot rest, even as a collective being, in his rational consciousness and worldly economic efficiency. The call on man is not merely for efficiency, but for self development and self finding. And the rational is only the middle term between the infrarational and the suprarational. Therefore, the present is a transitional stage. This is so because man is in his essence is not merely mind. Man in his essence is not a mental consciousness, nor is he only life, the vital consciousness. He is essentially the spirit. Mind, life, and body are his instruments. And in the process of evolution on earth, he is moving from matter, the inconscience of matter, to the spirit, slowly increasing the expression of the subjective element in the process of growth. It is by increasing the action of the subjective element in his individual and collective life that man will be moving towards his perfection. Ethics is an important activity of man's subjective life. It is a movement of the dynamic will towards perfection, and it is an effort to mold action in harmony with an inner truth felt in the being. Man wants to attain the right in his behavior by ethics, and this right is attained when his behavior proceeds from a truth, realized or felt within his own self. Ethics results from an inner growth in which man is able to see and act independently of his self regarding ego, independently of his impulses, independently of his desires, and other mental, ignorant, and half conscious movements. This center of inner reference is called conscience by some people, which is not automatically active in all men. It has to be awakened, conscience, made free from mixtures of the movement of lower nature. And even in a man who is vigilant, there are chances of mistake in regard to the correct reading of the indications of conscience. It's a path, as the Upanishad says, like a razor's edge. This conscience is not mental in its nature, though it may make its influence felt in the mind. It may even give satisfaction to the seeking of truth by the mind. It is something absolute and self-existent, a living reality within oneself. It's a dynamic expression of the soul, this conscience. In order to manifest this inner reality in the collective life and also in the international field, a complete and a radical change in man's nature is needed. If it is to make itself effective in collective life permanently, then a change in central principle of collective life will have to be imperative. A collectivity will live not round and for the ego, but round its inmost soul, its inner spirit. No outer machinery can bring about this inner change in the individual and in the collectivity. In order that the inner guidance may be effective in the group life, the mass of humanity must attain a stage in which it lives more and more in the mind, in the mental consciousness. To manifest the perfection of the spirit in life is the goal of the individual and collective being. And when man advances sufficiently towards the spirit, he will find that the spirit, though multifarious and multitudinous in forms, is one, is divine in all. And the law of its working in life is love. Love based on that fundamental unity. All ethical striving, like all religious and spiritual aspirations, has for its goal the bringing of the kingdom of heaven on earth. To bring the Satyuga, the age of truth or gold. Observance and advance in ethics by individual and by men, acting in collective life according to the ethical conscience in the international life, will help to usher in this great golden age. That gives me one aspect of what I wanted to say.
Would you give us once more the name of the man who wrote Ethics in the United States?
Yes.
Is that the title?
Left, Ethics of United States Foreign Policy.
Ethics of United States Foreign Policy.
Lefevre, I think. Lefevre.
Lefebvre, how do you?
L-E, French, yes, I think it must have L-E and F-E-V-E-R, I think that's the idea.
R-E is Lefebvre.
Lefevre, I will just tell you. Probably have a title with it. Morgenthau was written a foreword to it. So,
These three words, liberty, equality, and fraternity, or brotherhood. Equality is the real problem. Because, basically you can say we're equal inside our potentialities. But how to apply that equality in an aggregation and not confuse all issues is really, that's the real problem.
no, that is what socialism attempts. Socialism
I mean,
attempts.
it doesn't work the thing out.
No, because it doesn't realize that this is not to be based on interest, idea, or an outer equality.
Well, that's the point.
You see, the equality is the equality of the soul. And when it says equality, you grant an equal opportunity to all souls. That's all. An equal opportunity for all souls that are potentially divine to rise to their fullest or highest development. This has to be admitted, and therefore all souls must be potentially regarded as equal in the divine essence.
But
And that attitude has to be first created, the attitude of regarding all fundamentally as equal in spirit. Just now, because man does not live in the spirit, first of all. So a habit in mind has to be established. Because it is in mind that this inequality, superiority, you can say, inferiority, or values in life of people who think they are a higher strata and others are lower strata, and values in life are so terrible. I mean, to bring this equality is the problem, in fact. To bring this equality of the soul, the divine element in man, to bear upon actual situations in individual and collective life, to believe in it also. To believe in it, that is true. And then in an actual situation to guide conduct by that vision. By that vision of that, that equal, all are equal. From there to act, to think, to feel. Well, that will bring the real equality nearer. It is not by a scheme that this could be done, because that he has made it very clear that when you do it scheme, you will do it with the mind. And you will believe that outer equal behavior is real equality, which is really not even fulfillment. If you create an equality, just as the Bolsheviks tried in Russia, they failed miserably because it was not equality. In fact, he said in one of his writings that when real outer equality is attained, the world will cease to exist because there will be no cause for the world. If everything became equal in the sense of uniformity, the world will cease to exist because there is no necessity for the world afterwards.
I don't see that point.
Yeah.
I don't follow that argument, though.
If equality was completely attained and if all became actually equal, then there is no world. The world will cease to exist.
It's supposed to be variation.
Yes,
Supposed to be
yes,
variation.
exactly. Yes, if equality came to a literal physical, mental, and intellectual equality, there is no necessity for a world. It is he wrote very strongly one day. He says the world will cease to exist because there will be no reason for it to exist. The reason for it is this multiplicity and the variation, the diversity. Equality cannot be outer. It is only an inner equality which permits, necessitates, and even enjoys and enriches the equality and the unity by the multiple play. That is really the basic truth.
Doesn't communism and perhaps socialism try to enforce an equality that is?
That is the difficulty. When you do it with the mind,
Yeah.
with the outer organization or outer means, it is driving from outside in, which doesn't succeed. And also when it succeeds, it fails in its aim. When it actually in Russia, they tried to succeed in creating a kind of leveling up. They found there was no fulfillment, afterwards no progress. The collectivity itself will be starved out. The moment uniformity is attained, it will be a status quo, and it will be dullest round of life that you can imagine. Because everything is fixed. Even now it is pressing towards that with this economy-centric outlook. Even now it is pressing for that. And people tell me, as I told you, and Mari was arguing the other day, that you fix everything 6 months in advance. But why? It's not necessary. Why should you fix 6 months in advance? What is the hang? Live life and go. Oh, but collective life. Oh, yes, collective life. You roughly arrange something like that. Roughly like that, you rearrange that we will have this very nearly this will be our idea. But you have always a room for variation. They say, oh, university, 6 months. Otherwise, I won't come every 6 months. If I am there and if they want, I am available. I will go tomorrow to any university and talk to them. No, 6 months. Well, so mechanical we have become in the process of life. We have no room for, for individual growth or change or something. You may change your mind. Why? What you will do 6 months, how it staggers me to think like you can say yes, I might go this and I might do it, but it is not as if now that is fixed. This is you knock it out and say no. What is that? Why? You say no.
But if you've given your word and people depend on you, the reason I was questioning this is because Dr. Chaudhry brought this up in regard to Dr. Piper at Syracuse. How they have to, in the structure, they have to plan ahead of time.
Yes, they have to. I admit, I don't say why, but I say what happens to life, that's all. I don't object to their planning. They are planning all over the world.
I mean, if you've given your word, you have to follow through.
Yes, I hope so. You think twice before your word.
You can't say, so for 6 months I may or I may not. If they're dependent on it, you have to do it. This is ethics too,
Yes,
isn't it?
quite right.
But Indians don't keep that.
Oh, I have not known. At least myself, I have never done that.
Big programs and then all the crowd comes, and I get a call. I don't feel like coming, and I am with 125 people. I don't know.
Well, now what is
Speaker.
How would you
3 or
meet?
5 times.
How would you meet a situation like that?
Huh?
How would you meet a situation like that when now we think over here that it's a quality of character. If you give
Yes.
your word, you
Yes.
follow through.
You think twice or 100 times before you give a word. That's all. But if you give, you do. Yes.
Or send
You know what you're in for.
for.
You know what you're in for.
Well, then that is a lack of discipline. If
Yes.
you
Yes.
don't want to,
naturally.
so you change your mind at the last minute. This is a lack of consideration for the group.
Oh, yes. I had occasion to teach an Englishman manners. I mean, time, keeping the time. Keeping time. Well, Professor Leo Roth. He told me at 1 o'clock we'll be at Vega taking our lunch. So will you please come? I said yes. So about 7 or 10 minutes before I was there. And unfortunately, poor man, he was late. He couldn't come in time. I think there must be some reason. Anyway, he was late by 10 minutes or 12 minutes or something like that. And when he found that I was there already, oh, I was glad to meet you. I didn't expect you here. You would be so early. I said, I never miss my appointment even by a second. I had to tell him that. Not by a second. More than 110 appointments. Because you arrange your time in such a way as to leave margin even for some accident on the road. You see, because you never know.
And you were being judged by many other Indians that had not kept their appointments.
Exception to the rule. That's right. But India is changing in this respect.
Yes.
I think at least we noticed.
Yes.
I noticed a big difference since 1935, my first visit to India.
Yes. No, now there is a greater. For public events, I mean, you see, in your own life you can do, but for public event, if there is an engagement, you have to keep it. And great public workers, like people who are leaders in different departments, they try to keep to that time. Very rarely only you find 5% or 10% lagging behind and taking it easy like that as before. Gandhi said that also in public life. It must be said to his credit. He set that standard. That if it is 6 o'clock, it is 6 o'clock. If there is one man, he will proceed. A big political conference was there. And because the people thought that leaders will come a little late. So,
Because when you're working on an international scale,
yes, you
planning it has to be done.
Yes, I
You know,
know.
the printing and the advertising.
Yes, our time in is not to make a fetish of it, that's all. Then you can always keep a room for something else to manage in creep in between. Process of life also is there, and you have to keep margin for something else. You plan ahead and know that this is 99, 90%, this we will do. And if it requires a little modification, that also has some place. Then why not? But people are so hidebound, it's not that they have no chance of doing, they have a chance of doing it if they want to. If they want to do, they can always do. But they think now we are bound and that is the timetable and that will go like that. Good.
Of course, it's understandable, don't you think, in the universities and some of those places where they plan their curriculum a whole year in advance,
Yes.
sort of understandable.
That is because the course has to be given, a certain, certain teaching has to be parceled out, so to say, into volumes.
That's why generalities never fit life at all. They just don't.
Well, there are-
exceptions.
There are too many exceptions, but still, a generality is arrived at because of there's predilection toward or preponderance of. Seems to me.
No, collective life requires organization. You can't do without organization anything in collective life because it concerns many people at a time, and therefore it has to be an organization. Only how far to mechanize it and how far to keep a margin or opening for its growth or for its for it to do something which is in keeping with its need is a problem. But in collective
Super-rational
life,
change. When we have the super rational change, then we will have a new form, won't we?
yes,
Is this subject exhausted now? Have we?
yes, yes, this is exhausted.
There is one phrase that interests me very particularly. Reason, nature turning the mirror upon itself.
That is man.
I'm gonna just say this, and then I'll be very quiet. Karl Kaiserling, in his Meditations of South America, gives several chapters, and one of them is called The Inbreak of Spirit. And he said that spirit, the image of truth is never, he speaks of this half light. He said that knowledge and the spirit is never breaks itself upon man as a true image. It always comes as a reflected light. And then he traces this in a very philosophical order of vision, you see, that the inbreak of spirit into the mind and emotions of man, it is always distorted. It is never the true light. And he reasons this out until he comes to the inbreak of light of the spirit upon the organism of man in its various levels of consciousness. And all through, I have thought, I was just sort of waiting until something like this would turn up unconsciously and
Well, it's a psychic being that really he's speaking of. You see, really
Yes.
he's speaking of the psychic being. And Sherlock has indicated the process by which nature can go back to the leadership of the psychic being and bring the full light into it afterwards. That change is required. That is a transformation of nature. To leave its egocentric movement, to leave its individual desires or ideas, thoughts, and impulses, and to seek the guidance of the spirit that is behind, the true individual. Then mind and emotional being and vital being will work perfectly and express that which they are meant to express, because these are instruments. They are not the initiative or essential parts of man. They are only instrumental, in their operation. They should be regarded as instruments, and therefore, when they get at the right source, the right source will be able to influence them and make them act correctly.
yes.
So the breaking in is a process is left to man to withdraw and bring the full light also. That is the yogic process. The process is that you can withdraw from mind and go to and withdraw into the spirit. And when you withdraw into the psychic being, which is the true center of your individuality, well, whatever comes will be that which the spirit intends to manifest in intellectual or mental term or whatever it wants to express in mind. That is how it will work. All great, lights always have to do that. Now, some have done it with a purity which is remarkable. Some have done it with a mixture. You see, in some cases, the mixture has taken place also of their own, either individuality of their own times or the social conditions through which they received all these things. But the source is always available to man. In case of man like Sri Aurobindo, you find that it comes without the least deviation or deformation because he has worked out the channel in such a way that the individual man is not allowed to work in, which is to interfere. And therefore, you find when you read books like Life Divine or whatever he has written, that it carries that the force of light with it.
Yeah.
And therefore, greatest conviction, you see, because it is not a product of individual mind.
No.
He is not written from thinking, let me write, what shall I know? It's a sight. It is something that he has seen, and then he is only allowing the light to come and take hold of his mind and put itself in intellectual terms. So what you have is a light and not a mind. You see? But light in mental terms, so you have to accept because it is rational. He doesn't say accept me as an authority, this is the spirit. He never says that. This is an idea. He puts an idea. But the whole light has been thrown into the mold. And if you can get at the light in the mold, you know that it is the light of the spirit. That is the power of his writing. One of the powers of his writing. That's why that English lady who was reading without knowing anything about him, she was reading Life Divine and she wrote a letter to him afterwards that this is a strange experience I have come, that when I read this book, after finishing, when I sit down, I feel a great peace. I have been a student of philosophy and I read all philosophers. She was his MA and PhD, you see. And that has not happened to me by any philosophic writing. But when I read one paragraph or a chapter of Life Divine and sit down, I feel great descent of peace. So Sri Aurobindo replied that yes, it is not the book that you are reading, but you are coming in contact with the consciousness that has expressed itself in that intellectual mold. And if you go from the intellectual mold to the consciousness, naturally you get all that the consciousness has got. Peace is only the beginning. We can't tell that to the man in the street because he will say, it's like that. You give it the intellectual place and say, yes, here it is. You knock your head and find out whether you get knocked out.
I just need to say this, that I think Count Hadjari is the only, and I'm not a student of philosophy, I'm an uneducated person in many fields, but most fields. But he's the only person I ever read who had the insight and intuition to realize that there's so much blindness in man that you can't have a sudden inbreak of spirit, or you have
yes, that is to say, it will depend upon the individual.
The only person I ever read.
You see, it depends on the individual. This opening of the man's nature to the inner light is an individual, business work. You can't make it general. You can help it by creating an atmosphere. You can help other people also to self-awakening by creating an atmosphere. And that you can only create by doing it yourself. You cannot do it by saying. If you live the inner life, well, it will create conditions around you so that people around who want or have fitness to seek the inner life will seek it easily and better. An atmosphere you can create. You cannot give it to others by other means. It is only to be created here, and then people will get it, the awakening, because each one has the divine spark in him, and it is that which has to respond. We have some portion of the Gita left, which we have to do. We can do the Gita, or we can begin human cycle if you want. And so on. He said that, you see, if I knew before, I wouldn't have been so enthusiastic. caught me by the back door, he says. He said, he caught me by the back door, I couldn't back out afterwards.
That didn't come through the mind. That
Hmm?
probably was an
No.
impulse that came from your schedule. Must have come from another region.
Well, for instance, if you had tried to do this schedule in Los Angeles, you would have been broken because people can't get to see you here pouring in from the city. In my place, if you were to stay there and start these lectures, you wouldn't have one moment free all during the day. I've had these other Indians and they get so exhausted because appointment after appointment after appointment.
No, that we can,
You're kind of
we can refuse that. That is all right. We're not bound to appointment. And the appointment can be on a certain day only. That you can manage. And I wish there was a large number who could.
no, but there's so many calls in a big city.
But many times, though, they're really not coming for help. They're coming to someone to listen to them. A lot of them,
Yes,
too.
yes, yes, that's
People, when they hear about Purani, they.
I know, but a lot of them don't want to come for actual help. They want to come for this borrowed grandeur of.
Do you think that sometimes you could have a movie projector and have movies where people could actually hear your voice and see you and have a soundtrack too? Do you suppose that would be possible?
You mean like television?
I don't know yet. I had only one television talk at Albuquerque. I gave one television talk half an hour, and what happened to it I don't know afterwards, because they took a movie, they put it ready, and then they will project it at a certain time, they told me. And it was on, I suppose, but Dr. Icahn has not yet replied, so I don't know what happened. Something must have happened, I think. So,
It would be expensive to do this for all of us.
Yes.
in the eternal, but he is not conscious of his eternity. And he makes out a very fine philosophy of the rise of ignorance in this supreme consciousness. How the supreme consciousness has allowed ignorance to arise within it and holds the whole thing within his own self. Ignorance is not imposed on the divine. You see, it is within his own self. It's a purposeful and needed and intended movement of the supreme ignorance. And man is thrown into that ignorance. So for him, the whole past is not present. In fact, he suggests at one place in Life Divine that if the whole past were present, you would find very difficult to act.
Yeah.
Supposing the whole of the past, not of this life, but the whole life was present,
No, it would be.
you would find it very difficult to make a selection and say, this I must do. So in one sense, his ignorance of his eternity in time, is good for him, because it lends him an intensity to give a value and to make a decision as if the present point was the most important point, you see. And that brings his whole consciousness to bear upon that point of time. And birth is one point of time when he finds that he was, so to say, brought into the external consciousness, the consciousness of the divided life, you see. So that is the only importance, and that has some value in this sense that in the present, man the eternal, what he decides is his contribution to time. You see. In fact, this is existentialism. That's all they want to say, whatever their form. What they want to say is that that which is acting now in the present is the eternal. Only the point is that man is not conscious that it is the eternal.
Well, as he becomes more conscious of this, will he not put so much value on the birthday?
He will understand the value of it in time from the point of view of eternity. And he will say what it means from the point of view of not outer life but inner life. What it is meant to signify is from the point of view of eternal. and what he has to put forth in a certain milieu, certain situation, in mind or in life or in the world, you see. The time is like a flow, you see. And in that flow, what he has to put? Well, he sees from eternity, not from an ignorant point of view where he doesn't know the past and the future, and then he does something, decides as if this is the last minute and he must put forth whatever he thinks is the most important thing, decision. Well, that is why man acts in ignorance. And for him, time movement is therefore important because of the limitations under which he is working, mental, vital, and physical limitations. And also consciousness, limitation of consciousness, in which he is not conscious of three-fourths of his being.
But in a person like Aurobindo, or for
Yes,
the
they had been-
Pharisees that you used
yes,
for 2,000 years,
yes.
it's simply by observing their birthday, you recognize anew their contribution that they
Yes.
put into this moment of
Yes,
time.
not only that, they receive that moment of time is connected with that truth,
Yes.
with the represent.
It
That moment of time
re-emphasizes-
represents eternal recurrence of that possibility of connecting yourself with that truth which they have brought, vision of life or the truth of life, with which they have been associated. Well, their birthday brings cyclically the same movement again, a possibility of connection, because there is a in the movement of time there is a this cyclic recurrence. You see.
That's why I want to be here so badly on his birthday this year.
Breaking of birthdays, because the very fact that Aurobindo was born, the divine intent was there that this great work should be done.
Yes, of course.
And then this kind of a honor that freedom of India came on his birthday, because the purpose of his birthday is the freedom of India.
Yes, it's the connection of the vision of truth which he has brought. That is the constant renewal on the birthday. You see, renewal of possibility of contact with the truth consciousness, with the work or with the power which he brought. You can say more concretely.
Well, do you believe that because there was an opening from the divine, bringing a divine element into the earth, that every year there might be a similar opening of the same kind?
That would depend on Earth's condition, you see. But the work has been started, so we do expect like that. It has not been simply an idea, but a lot of work has been done, a lot of power and force and consciousness has acted. And also, if not a wide, a sufficiently good opening also is there in the Earth consciousness. So we expect that gradually it must go on increasing. It would tend to increase all along, and particularly on those occasions. I mean, that occasion affords an opportunity for a greater opening to the light, naturally, and we do expect it must go on increasing. But its connection doesn't depend upon that. My point is that, you see, if there is no opening, it doesn't mean the working is not going on. Because sometimes in a field of work, the resistance might be so strong that as not to make the opening, increase in the opening. But that doesn't mean that the work has stopped. That is not to be judged from outside. This is to be judged from how true the turning has taken place, how solid the basis has been established, how real has been the aspiration or opening. Because sometimes a thing runs into circulation in society as a fashion. I remember Gandhi's whole message percolating Indian society as a fashion only. I mean, you couldn't go to a meeting without a white cap, so you put on a white cap. You see? Now, that happens to any great thing. It is not. Gandhi didn't say anything about it, but it assumed a value somewhere in the top. Well, then everybody who didn't believe in it, didn't understand it, didn't want it, or didn't know what it was, but had to put it on almost out of a sense of compulsion, because he thought that if he doesn't do it, he will be out of fashion, almost, you see. So white cap, without any sense of what Gandhi stood for, what he meant, but white cap was the only thing he could take from Gandhi, you see. And then go in a meeting or a society where everybody says, oh, he also is putting on Gandhi cap, that's something. That was a change of value in one sense. That was even external change, indicated some change of value. But it didn't went very deep. I mean, it didn't go very deep. It was skin deep. They go home and put on all foreign clothes again, you see. White cap is for a certain type of meeting in certain circles, you see, where dinner is given by somebody where leaders with Congress attitude are there, then they go with white cap. If the government is giving a party, they will go with suit and everything. So like that.
The yellow robes of India are the same thing.
Yeah,
They don't mean
yes,
anything. They could mean something, but
They did mean, and they can in one in 100, they do mean even now, but it's all outer form. That's why Sri Aurobindo didn't put sannyas in as one of his items of the program. Because he knew that it would become so externalized that anybody could imitate and then nothing of the substance would be there. Whereas here he says that you have to renounce, but renounce from inside, which is greater and difficult work to do.
Several times you mentioned today. You said energy and force. Do you have any definitions that would be meaningful, or is energy and force a flexible thing? It's depending on how it's used.
Well, you can say there is some distinction, but you can't apply force without energy, for instance. Energy is supposed to be impersonal, while a force is behind force, there may be either an entity or an elemental being or somebody.
Oh,
Force is owned by somebody, you see, used by somebody. Energy may be impersonal and operative on its own, so to say, in a universal or impersonal way. But no force can be used without energy. If you use force, there must be energy.
well, I was thinking, of course, I asked this electronic engineer one time about force and energy in mechanical terms, trying to get the pure impersonal use of the terms. He ended up in complete confusion, so I decided to ask that again. I wondered, that's why I questioned if force always has an entity behind it.
Yeah, that's what we expect generally, force. And somebody who uses the force. Whereas energy might be operative on its own, self-existent or universal or impersonal. That also is a concept, but not true. You see, whereas behind energy there is an entity, but people don't notice it and don't see it, and therefore say it is impersonal and universal and so on.